On today's episode of An Echo of Glory, we talk about the squad, the value of winning a trophy, and Gary's jaw drops to the floor. Welcome to another episode of An Echo of Glory. We're not taking a summer break. We're going to carry on through the summer, and we're going again today. Joining me once more, Gary Diamonds.
Morning.
And making his debut on the pod, another Jake. It's a bit like Athletic Bilbao here. The Bilbao have to have players from the Basque region. We have to have Jake sitting in that chair. It's Assistant Sports Editor of The Sun, Jake Sanders. Hello.
Good morning. How you
Good
doing?
morning. How are you?
Yeah, not bad.
Welcome to the pod.
Glad to be here.
Good. Look, we're going to go straight in as we always do with club news. Gary, you wanted to tell us about a contract for a new player, Alfie Dorrington.
Yeah,
Sorry, not a new player, a young player.
A young player, Alfie Dorrington. No, this came up on Club News, and I've seen a little bit of the youth teams this season on their cup runs, more sort of snippets and highlights and so on. And I think this is it's just a positive bit of news. Alfie Dorrington's a very, very highly rated under-18 centre-back. I would expect to see him on the bench in a couple of games next season. He brings the ball out brilliantly from the back, from what I've seen. I just thought that was a lovely bit. And he's a Spurs boy as well. So just nice. And I think that youth setup is something that can't be overlooked.
It's been criticised. It has been criticised.
It's been criticised in the context of the under-21s and what happened with them. But the under-17s and under-18s had really good seasons. And there's actually a lot of talent. It feels as though there's a lot of talent coming through those teams. So for somebody like Dorrington to sign a new contract, I just think it's a big positive.
Good. Also in the news this week, new kit. I will never get over the kit having red in it, Jake. But your thoughts? All white kit for the first time in a long time.
I'm not usually one to be overly bothered about a kit, but I like it nice and smart. As we were discussing earlier, the last time we wore all white outside of European games, we won a trophy. So hopefully that's a good omen. We got to cling on to something, haven't we? So we'll take that with us to next season. But yes, nice and smart.
Gary?
There's been some talk about the all-white, hasn't there? And the lack of blue shorts. I love the all-white kit. I think it just looks really smart, royal, regal. When Spurs go up the steps at Wembley in an all-white kit, it feels like that is what it feels like.
Where?
But it feels like that's what looks and feels right about football. I like the kit. I really do.
It's normally saved for European football. We haven't got any this year, so maybe that's why they've rolled it out so we can see it. Another thing, listen, fashion. Talking about the kit is about fashion. One of our fashion gurus on the pod this year has been Ryan Mason. Talk about him as divided opinion once again on social media. Whether he stays as Postecoglou's number 2 or part of the coaching staff, for some reason, has divided a lot of opinion. I personally think he should stay. Where are you on Mason staying amongst the coaching staff, Jake?
I think from him it would have been better for him to get maybe a championship job to enhance himself as a manager and not an assistant. But look, it's a smart move from Ange getting a Spurs boy on side who's generally popular with the fans, and he must be doing something right because this is the 4th manager. I can't remember whether he was on the coaching staff with Nuno, but obviously Mourinho and Conte, so 4 managers in a row have seen something. So I think it's a smart move from Ange, and I'm happy with it.
Do you think that having been at the club through those managers that Jake mentions, actually there might be a bit of PTSD with him, that he needs to move away because he almost knows too much?
The discussion that we were having when talking about a new manager was that Mason had thrown his hat into the ring, and you almost do have to wonder if he has his eyes on the big job, is it a positive thing, him staying? Look, I've got a lot of time for Ryan Mason. I've always been impressed whenever I've heard him speak. I really liked the sound bites that he was putting out towards the end of last season about getting back to playing football in the Tottenham way. We've spoken about this in the past on the pod as well, about the comments that Mason was making. He is a Spurs boy through and through. He's only 32. It's easy to forget. Is it 32 today? Yeah. It's easy to forget how young he is, and the reality is this is a guy that should still be playing professional football. So the idea of him shooting off to manage a championship club or wherever else at this point of his career could well be premature, and he might well be thinking to himself, I've seen under Nuno, Mourinho and Conte, as you mentioned, Jake, a very defensive style of coaching, a very defensive style of play, it would actually serve me in my career very well to see how an offensive style of coaching is taught. Obviously he was there under Poch, but to be there firsthand and learn from Postecoglou can only be a good thing for his career. But there are obviously those questions around how close is he to the squad, and that's another thing, by the way.
Oh, hang on, there's talk on social media that he's a Levy plant. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, those sorts of things I've got no time to entertain. It's just ridiculous. But also what I was going to say was the fact that Postecoglou is renowned for keeping his distance from the players. So having somebody that is close to them and that they can trust and confide in, you need to keep that around. And that could be a reason why Postecoglou does deliberately keep coaching staff at the club that's been there previously, in order that he can maintain that distance but still have that touch point with somebody like Mason. So I think it is an important connection between the squad and Postecoglou. The idea of being a Levy plant is completely ridiculous, and we should look at this as only a future positive, a current positive, but also a future positive for Tottenham Hotspur Football Club to have somebody there that is ingrained, loves and is passionate about the club.
But on a personal level, you mentioned it, Jake, I see there was links to Southampton. I think it would be a good idea for... I'd love him to stay because I think he's a Tottenham man, and it's great to have that around the club. Like you say, on a personal level, if he went to Southampton, for example, and managed there 2, 3, 4 years, he's only 32, but if he stays as a coach for another 2, 3 years, he's 35, he's 36, does it become too late for Ryan? Not too late, but does he start to get labelled as, he's just a number 2?
Maybe he feels he's not ready himself, so he's, biding his time a little bit, and possibly he's trying to work under as many coaches as possible to sort of enhance himself. As we said, he's not really worked under an attacking coach before, so he's trying to gather as much information as possible to make sure he's in as good of a position as he can be in when eventually he feels like he's ready. But we may not know. He may have been interested in jobs this summer, and now he's got this offer, and he's thought, who am I to turn down another role at Spurs?
Okay, so look, Mason might stay, might go. We've skirted in the last few episodes around the issue of the squad. I think now's the time to talk about it. It's a bloated squad. I don't think anybody will deny that. We've got 7, 8, 9 players coming back from loan. Some you may want to keep, some you may want to sell. But we've got to get players out. We've got to get players in. How do you see the squad, Gary? I know it's a big question because there's so many players. But what would be the first moves you would make if you had that, if you were given that decision with regard to squad?
We all know the key positions that we need this summer that are kind of non-negotiable, right? We need a goalie. We need a minimum of 2 centre-backs. There's been talk about Lenglet coming in. I can't believe that he would come in as one of those 2 centre-backs. I'd like to think it's Lenglet plus 2.
But there's talk that Postecoglou plays with 4.
But yeah, I mean, listen, the reality is that the whole team is going to need revamping. And the biggest issue that we have is the one that you mentioned there, is we have a very, very bloated squad, which is about to get even bigger with the players returning from loan. One of the reasons that those players are on loan is the difficulties that we've had in selling these players. And I don't think many of them, with the possible exception of Winks, who unfortunately was on loan at Sampdoria, who went down, so they ain't buying him. But with the possible exception of Winks, I don't think any of them covered themselves massively in glory.
NDombele's won a title. You can argue about how much. I think he did play a role in that. He wasn't a natural starter for them, but he won a title. He played a role in that.
He came on about 75, 80 minutes.
None of them have been regular starters.
None of them have been regular starters, and NDombele had minimal impact. I think he was there to save legs for the last 15 minutes of another player.
What a player to bring on for the legs.
For 200k a week. It's kind of ridiculous. None of them have enhanced their reputations and done anything outside of Harry Winks, as I say, to make you think, or make another club think that actually, I'm going to buy them. An example of that is the natural club for Lo Celso to have gone to might have been Aston Villa with why have I gone blank on Villa's manager? Unai Emery. With Emery though, who's managed him previously, right? That might have been a natural place for him to go, but they've gone and signed Tielemans this week. And so I don't think they're going to be looking at Lo Celso. So that's one avenue closed from a club that could have the money. But obviously, Tielemans is a better prospect for free than Lo Celso for 15-20 million. It makes complete sense for Villa that they could get Tielemans, but it leaves us with Lo Celso. The difficulty we have in moving these players, and there's a number of them, just to run through. Reguilon. I mean, this is a guy that couldn't get a game.
But I think he's someone we could sell for money. He's young, he's quick, he's okay. we've got so many left backs. He's someone who's going to have left-sided players.
But European clubs are not offering money. They're simply saying that we haven't got the money, and they're not offering it. I can't see that we're going to sell him for any money. I can't see that we're going to get anything for NDombele, which is a huge hit. I can't see we're going to get anything for Lascelles. So Rodon has to go. Winks has to go. I mean, you know, we know that Lloris is going to go. He's got a year left on his contract. Can we grab 5 million for him, or are we just going to end up giving him away? There's no money coming in, and we almost have to go down the route now of Arsenal, as they did, and take the hit and just free up the places in the squad, free up the wages, cancel the contracts, and let them all go on a free.
That's part of it, Jake. We've got to sell a lot of players or get rid of a lot of players. Some are probably going to have to go for cut price deals. I don't know if there's any money. You may hear things. I don't know if there's money around the club to spend. It sounds like we're going to have to get a few out to get a few in. But also what we need is a plan. And it's been a long time since we had a plan.
I think one of the biggest things for next season is the fact that we've not got any European football. We've sort of had those extra 10, 12 games in the last 15 years where, you can have a few squad players that sort of stick around. Yep. We can't have that next season.
That's also never helped us because those players have come
No, I agree. Because we've had, we had it. I remember the Conference League campaign 2 years ago with, the Vetisanen and the Ren and the Mura stuff, which was a bit of a shambles. Those players can't afford to stick around. There's a good chance if we don't have cut runs next season that this is going to be the least games we've played in God knows how many years next season.
Yeah.
So we need to, push these players out. We need to be really ruthless. You can't have, Perisic, for example. If he's not going to be playing in the Premier League, he's not, is a player like that going to want to stick around.
Do you think Spurs fans would rather see an Alfie Dorrington, who we spoke about earlier, on the bench ahead of Sanchez or Dyer?
I mean, it's difficult because that's sort of the flip side of things. If we were in the Conference League, for example, that would be a perfect opportunity to play them.
But we can't risk those guys sitting on the bench. If someone goes, Romero gets injured or sent off early doors, we bring on Alfie Dorrington.
Yeah, definitely.
He might be a player in the future, but he's not ready to come in and play.
Don't like to go back to the Arsenal reference, but that's where they, that's where they started with, your Sakas and your Smith Rowes and your Nketiahs. And we've, when was the last time we had someone come off the bench outside of the Leeds game, a youngster in a Premier League game?
Yeah, it doesn't
happen.
It's
been a long time. So pushing some sort of senior players out could be a good opportunity for a couple of them youngsters to.
But I do think this is a season to do that, because do we have the expectations of finishing top 4 with everything around us? I'm not saying that we should be satisfied. 7th would be not great, but if we were to finish 5th or 6th, and Sanchez was to leave, and Dyer was to leave, and actually we had Lenglet, Romero, 2 other centre-backs, 4 centre-backs, but your 5th centre-back was an Alfie Dorrington, would we not all rather see that this season than a Sanchez or a Dyer who we know what they are, we know where they are, and actually, if it comes to the point where we need Dorrington in the league,
I think fans would be happy. Oh, look, we're promoting from within.
Fans love the whole. Oh, play this one, get this youngster on the bench.
Exactly.
It's not as easy as that.
No.
There's a massive jump between under 18s, 21s.
But they're not. But if they're not getting the minutes, they're not going to learn.
But yeah, I do.
Another
agree.
one is
We've seen
Alfie
players
Divine.
we've seen players chucked in previously and it's gone well. So if it needs to happen, then I'm sure fans would rather watch a youngster than Lenglet or Dyer for another 35 games next season.
No, I think Lenglet has value to him. I actually quite like Lenglet, to be fair. But certainly, we know what Dyer is. We know what Sanchez is. These guys have got to go. You spoke about PTSD just earlier. These guys, they carry all of that with them from the last 5, 6, 7 years, right? They've been there. They've been consistent. With Lloris going as well, it's a really good chance to get these guys out. And I just think I personally would prefer to see youngsters as not the first or second backup, but certainly the third. I'd like to see Alfie Dorrington get minutes. I'd like to see Alfie Divine getting minutes this season. Not big minutes, but I'd like to see them coming off the bench, and I'd like to see Postecoglou apparently is a big advocate of blooding youngsters into a team. And,
but as Jake said, it's difficult this year.
But then again, we go back to the whole, just 2 examples. People were raving over Troy Parrott and Dane Scarlett, and Troy Parrott has really, really, really struggled in the lower leagues, and Would you want Troy Parrott coming back into the squad now when he struggled in the Championship, let alone players that have not even had that sort of experience?
Yeah.
Well, hang on. Harry Kane suffered.
No.
Harry Kane's
he's a huge.
How is he? But hang on.
He's a huge exception.
He is an exception.
He's a one in a million.
He is an exception. But I sort of feel as though a lot of the players coming in from youth teams would have better chance playing with better players, albeit at a higher level.
Yeah.
Than trying to going to be the main man, which is I think what they're kind of expected to be at lower levels.
Yeah,
that's valid.
Yeah, but as I said to Jake, we need a plan, and this is almost the great reset that Poch talked about 4 years ago. That hasn't really happened. Now it has to happen, but it's happening probably 4 years too late, and we don't really have any money. It seems
we don't know how much money we've got, and we don't. We've wasted a load of money. I mean, I think a positive is that we are linked to Raya this week. Yeah. Apparently agreed personal terms with him.
I think we all agree that Lloris's time is up.
I think Lloris agrees.
I think
Lloris was the first one to put his hand up and say my time's up. Well, she had put his hand up in goal a couple of times this season. But yeah, no, I think Raya would be a very good positive signing,
and he's
homegrown, which is huge in goal. I think to have a homegrown keeper is a big thing because it just frees up a foreign space.
Spending his youth in Blackburn will help us massively.
And it's sort of, I feel it's kind of cathartic that we've had Eric Dyer all these years who hasn't been homegrown playing for England. Yeah. Now, it feels cathartic that actually we'll put the shoe on the other foot and we'll have David Raya playing for Spain but is homegrown. The whole thing is madness, but there you go.
Yeah. All right, look, so goalkeeper, we think it's going to be David Raya. A lot of talk about that. It's haggling over is it 40 million, is it 30 million, but hopefully the club will get it done. James Maddison, I just saw before we recorded, Newcastle are starting to push a little bit more on that. Is he somebody you'd want? He's someone that I would like to sign, but again, you sign James Maddison, looking at the players we have, it's how he fits into the squad. It's going to take so long to bring these players in. This is not going to be a quick fix. You do sign a Maddison, you've got to change the way you play.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, every fan, that watches Premier League football knows what James Maddison's about. And I'm sure a lot of Spurs fans would think, him in front of Bissouma and Bentancur is a really exciting trio. But with a new manager, we don't exactly know how he's going to play, and we don't know exactly how that's going to work. It's not as simple as that. I mean, personally, I'd love Maddison. He's got loads about him. He's got great delivery, which we've not had for years, maybe since Eriksen. He scores goals from midfield, which again we've pretty much never had really. And the link up with Kane is exciting, and his set pieces are really good. But you never really know with us. You always sort of worry when we do spend a bit of money. I mean, I know Maddison's proven, and I'd want him, but I'm always slightly cautious. And
Gary Maddison.
He's a really talented player. There's no doubt. I think if we got him, we'd be very lucky to have him. He's still fairly young. I think he's 27 only in October or November of this year. It concerns me that he fluctuates, I think, a great deal in level of performance. He is also slightly injury prone. It's one of those where if we get him, obviously fantastic. If we don't get him, I won't be devastated, but it would depend on who else we would get. There's been a lot of talk about Alex Scott at Bristol City, who I've also seen a little bit of, and he looks like a really good talent. And
but young and inexperienced.
But again,
you've seen him.
Both, I've seen a lot of him. He's brilliant. Yeah. But both, we need to sign both. It's
but
not.
I don't think
it's
we'll
not
get
a
both.
one or another.
You're right. It shouldn't be one or the other.
I know.
But
People will cite to Dele Alli and say,
well, exactly.
But both.
Yeah, but that's it. I would love for us to get Maddison and Alex Scott.
We've missed out on various EFL players over the years. One of them was Maddison. Eze, we should have gone all out for Eze, and there's been quite a few players apart from Ali where other clubs, your Brightons, your Leicesters, Palaces have picked them up. A bit like their managers and Spurs fans go, we should have signed him. No, we should have signed him before he signed for them. Yeah. And we should be doing that now because Alex Scott will sign for a mid-table Premier League club and then be worth 60 million in a few years.
And is a Spurs boy. Alex Scott.
Is he?
Big Spurs fan. Okay. Is friendly with a number of the players in the squad. I think it would be a dream move for him. So I agree with you entirely. If I could, write it out, I would have Maddison and Scott. But if we don't get Maddison, and we were to get Scott, I would be equally as excited about something like Alex Scott.
And learning off Maddison as well is a real.
Tell me about him, Jake. I've not really seen him, and I know you've watched a lot of VFL.
He's really good. He's got that Jack Grealish when he was at Villa as a youngster.
But he's more central, isn't he?
Yeah, not position wise, but he's got that real, arrogance. I know I'm the top player, really, arrogant, running past players, getting in the box, scoring goals. I think he got 7 or 8
What about physicality for the Premier League for a young kid? Like, is he big enough, strong enough?
Yeah, he looks very strong. There's quite a few compilations you can watch on YouTube of him. Really, looks.
Nobody
really,
looks bad on YouTube.
No, but really strong. Really, holding players off. I know anyone looks good on YouTube, but really, you can see he's, physical demands, and you'd imagine, getting to a Premier League club, they'll try and, bulk him up a little bit more. But he looks physically ready. From what I've seen so far, I've watched a lot of the Championship, and
I've seen a little bit of him, but you've seen a lot more. As a central midfielder, is he box to box? Is he more of an 8, more of a 6? What would you describe him as?
I think he's played more of an 8. He's played a 10 as well.
So
he's sort of box to box,
role.
Bringing the ball out and beating players and coming from deep. That kind of sort of player.
If they're that similar, though, I suspect we wouldn't sign both, knowing Tottenham.
That's it. I can't see that we'll sign both. But this is what I'm saying. If we don't get Maddison, I wouldn't be upset. A 19-year-old kid who's a Spurs fan who I feel is very gettable and with a huge amount of potential.
Yeah.
I would be equally. It's more of a gamble. It's more of a risk. I get that, but then Maddison could get injured for 3 months in a season. He seems to quite regularly, and like I said, his performances fluctuate. We're in that rebuild period, that rebuild phase. Postecoglou is looking towards the next 3-4 years, bringing in an Alex Scott now, and blooding him in the Premier League, so that next season. Not this season, coming the season after. We've got a real prospect on our hands. I think that's the way we should be going.
We're talking about all of this, and there's still no director of football. That's gone really quiet. How important do you think that is? Do you think we may go quiet on that? Because Postecoglou, we talked about it last week with Dan Garb. He's never really played with one. Again, it's social media talk. Maybe Scott Munn's doing a little bit of this now. How important do you think a director of football is to the club?
It depends. Definitely with someone like Ange, not been in the Premier League before. If we employed a well-known manager that has worked in the Premier League before, I'd say we could be all right. But with Ange, you want someone that he knows well, and someone that has got a good working relationship. I mean, we've seen. I know that the whole stuff that went on with Paratisi is generally a bit negative, but he brought in some really really good signings. I know they've not all sort of hit the ground running, but when we signed, the majority of players we signed under Paratisi, fans were generally happy.
I agree.
So
agreed. It shows the value, didn't it?
I know director of footballs generally over the last 15 years at Spurs have not always been a success, but based off just the last one, the players we brought in, I'd definitely say it's important.
But that's all part of the plan, and we just got to see one, and we've got to put it in place.
The director of football for me is somebody whose value is in ensuring continuity over the next 5, 7, 10, 15 years. And therein lies a problem, because how many directors of football actually last that time as well? They do all seem to be almost as short term as managers. So I do wonder if under Postecoglou he's saying, look, we have a head of recruitment, okay, and these are the players that the type of player, the attributes of a player that I want. Go and get those. And with a 4-year contract for Postecoglou, if he were to see that through, then the philosophy and style is ingrained into the club without the director of football. So it is possible that a director of football could come later. But there was a lot of talk about the need for a director of football that seemed to come from the club. So I wonder if to not get one feels a little bit like, could they not get one? Or it does raise a question. But I don't think it is essential as long as complete faith is put in Postecoglou and we let him run his course and implement his project.
Yeah, look, I agree. Look, once again, I say this every week. I love to hear both your opinions, but we're actually going to get an actual expert on. So we're going to be joined now by reporter Paul Belverstone. Delighted to now be joined by Spurs fan and reporter Paul Belverstone. Paul, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Johnny. Like this podcast.
Good, thank you. Nice to hear. Look, as I said, you're a Spurs fan, but you're also someone who's worked alongside the club closely in your professional role. We've been talking here about the ins and outs of the club possibly this summer. It's another new dawn, another new hope. We've all seen it, you've seen it. How much change can you realistically see happening at the club this summer?
I think big change is long overdue, isn't it? And then the question is, will it happen or not? There's a bloated squad. There's a lot of players that we haven't seen in a Spurs shirt for a long time who are still part of the club. And, the new manager's got a big job on his hands to assess who he wants, who he doesn't. There's this change of formation that everyone's expecting, going back to 4 at the back. The squad isn't built for that, hasn't been, the last few transfer windows haven't had that in mind at all. So there is a lot of work to do. The chairman has been reluctant in the past to see a lot of overhaul, hasn't he? And that was the big cause of problems with Mauricio Pochettino at the end. So, I'd like to think there will be some change, but it'll be interesting. We don't know about the new manager, what he thinks of the players that are there already and how many big gaping holes there are in the squad for the formation he wants to play. He's used a lot of different formations throughout his career, by all accounts. Maybe he sees that he's got pretty much everything he's got. Well, I would like to see some change, lots of change.
Paul, you've been in and around the club for quite a long time, to some degree or another. In the last couple of weeks since Ange Postecoglou has been appointed, have you heard or seen or anything about the change in environment, change in atmosphere, positivity? And if not, just how do you think Ange will impact the squad and the whole atmosphere around the training ground?
He's got a very big, easy win in his hands straight away because of the training schedule. Antonio Conte, for reasons that no one was ever able to work out, would only set the next day's training schedule between 6 in the evening, 8 in the evening. And that meant the players' plans for the next days had to change. They could never set things up with their families, picking up kids from school, all that sort of thing. And it wasn't as simple as, well, training's always going to start at 10:30 and you're going to be finished by midday. It could be an afternoon session, a morning session, a mid-morning session. Why you would do that, I don't know, because it messed up everyone's... I mean, imagine going home and you're every day telling the missus, sorry, I don't know if I can do that for you tomorrow because the manager still hasn't told me when we're due in.
By
all accounts,
I never knew any of this.
Is that, Paul, why you think there's often talk that Conte could not deal with European football and league football?
Well, that's not going to help when he's trying to work out when games are and how to train and things. I mean, Postecoglou, by all accounts, sets a monthly training calendar and sticks by it absolutely religiously. So everyone knows where they are going to be 30 days down the road. And that helps the coaches, it helps the medical staff, it helps the media guy. It surely helps everyone. Now, by all accounts, Conte was a very, his football teams were always very well organised. Quite how his training schedules were so chaotic, that has always baffled me. We're gonna be seeing a squad that has everything running by clockwork now, and I think another thing is that Conte would often get right in training drills and say, no, you need to be a few yards over there, or look, why haven't you gone there? And you need to do it. So he'd start training sessions all the time. Postecoglou's done a training video where he explains his methods. He says, no, we do the training schedule. We do the training drills. We do maybe 2 drills or whatever for half hour each. And I don't get involved because we've done all the planning beforehand and afterwards. We video all the sessions like every club does now. And then we analyze those. And it's after the session and the next day before the next session, we say, look, this didn't quite work. This did work. And so everyone goes into every session knowing what they should be doing, how it should be going, and you're learning constantly like that rather than being interrupted all the time. I think, all of these things are just going to help. I've been to a lot of Tottenham press conferences over the years. The last 12 months, I didn't do quite so many. The ones I did do, I never came away feeling very upbeat, optimistic. I remember one I went to in January. I hadn't been for a while. And the way it used to go with Antonio Conte was because his answers were so long, because he would often repeat what he said 2 or 3 times, every journalist was only allowed 2, maybe only even 1 question, so that the press conferences would only be sort of 30, 35 minutes long. Sky went first and they asked their couple, and there wasn't anything hugely critical of him going on. I remember it wasn't quite a tap-in opening question, but Conte basically just launched into a rant, as he often did. And so my first question was simply, Antonio, are you okay? Are you happy? And again, he sort of went on a similar sort of rant about, I'm happy if we're winning and I'm happy. I'm happy here, but I need the right conditions and all that sort of thing. And it sort of sucked the air out of the room. And I think if you're doing that in press conferences where he was never really getting grilled until perhaps at the end. It was always him setting the agenda and going off on these rants often. I imagine it's a similar sort of atmosphere in the dressing room a lot. Ange Postecoglou doesn't seem to be that kind of guy at all.
No.
Paul, got two things for you. Firstly, what do you think the toughest challenge Ange faces this season? And secondly, what do you sort of think the targets are next season? Obviously, everyone's desperate to win a trophy, but we've sort of gone from regularly challenging for the Champions League to 3 pretty tame finishes in the last 4 seasons. Obviously, out of Europe now. What do you sort of think? Do they want from him? Is it sort of another top 4 push, or should we sort of be getting back in the Europa League of the standards dropped? What should we be expecting next season?
I'd like to think there's going to be a bit of realism that, there are giants in the Premier League with vast resources at their disposal, a new giant in town with Newcastle, for example. And any new manager, particularly when it needs a big rebuild, as this squad does, a new style of football, new players potentially coming in, the biggest player potentially we've ever had possibly leaving, there's going to be that soap opera dragging on and on. I'd really like to think that there'd be a lot of optimism and just good atmosphere around if we started playing good football again, were challenging in every game that we went into, rather than just, a beating of Manchester City and then a crashing back down to earth with 2 or 3 miserable performances in a row. A bit of reasons for feeling good about paying all the money it costs to go and support Tottenham Hotspur, really. And then with that, you'd like to think that a bit of a cup run is possible as well, and taking the cup seriously, as Postecoglou clearly does. He's won 5 out of 6 in Scotland, hasn't he? So as far as the biggest job, the first one, it's all about Harry Kane, isn't it?
Yeah.
His role, Postecoglou, he's not going to have the biggest say in that player's future, but if he's going, he needs to know soon so that he can plan without him. If he's staying, he needs to really work on him to make sure that he does give absolutely 100% and has his best possible season in a Spurs shirt. I don't think if Kane does stay for this season, and then with the spectre of the free transfer in a year's time, he is going to be asked about that an awful lot. It's going to take an awful lot for him to have his mind purely focused on the job for Spurs. It's not going to be easy. If there's a man that can do it, I think Kane is that man. But it's not going to be a very nice distraction for this next 12 months if that is the road that we're going down. So that does need to be sorted out soon, and defending better while also being able to attack and threaten teams. It's not the easiest task he's taking on.
Just finally, Paul, something we've talked about today on the pod as well is Ryan Mason. Him staying or not staying seems to have divided opinion. I just want to know, how well do you know him as a character? How's he perceived at the club? And do you think it would be a good thing for Postecoglou to keep him by his side?
I very much do. I think he's very, very popular in that squad. He is not afraid to speak his mind. I've sat down with him a couple of times and have been very impressed each time. I think he'd make a brilliant manager in the Championship next season, but I very much hope that he stays and continues to grow. I can understand the sort of the jeopardy around it, him not wanting to be pigeonholed as a number 2 and a firefighter who comes in when everything goes wrong again. But I think he's got good ideas. Of course, they didn't all work in his short spell this time around, but I also think there was a big improvement this time around compared to the first time, which was by no means any sort of failure. So I think he's got a great future ahead of him. He is very, very well liked in the club, and just I spoke to him a couple of games to go in the season. I sat down with him for 15 minutes for an interview, and he wasn't, while he was spending all of his hours out in the training ground, of course, trying to get the best out of the club, trying to get the best out of the remaining games he had, he wasn't one of these players or managers or characters who sort of comes in, keeps you waiting, comes in half hour late, and then as soon as you've said thanks very much, he's ripped off his microphone and is out the door. He hung around, he came in early, had a chat beforehand, hung around afterwards, again, having a chat. And he wasn't in a very easy position then. That was way before the new manager was announced. He'd thrown his hat in the ring for the job. He didn't know what was going on. So you could have excused him just being quite brief and blunt, but he didn't shy away from any of the questions, was very, very driven and clear on how he thought things needed to be put in place for next season and the future, and was very optimistic about the future of the club and for this season and for next season as well. So, you know, he's someone I've got great respect for. I would really like to see us use him properly, you know, reward his loyalty as well, and give him a real big job under this new manager. And I think Postecoglou, by all accounts, is the kind of guy who will very quickly realise that he's someone he wants in his corner. He's someone who puts huge sway in attitude and character ahead of, I don't know, you know, fleeting moments of talent and trying to tap into those more, you know, and he gives his coaches 3 or 4 players to focus on, and then he oversees the lot of it. And I think giving Ryan Mason one of those senior coaching roles would be a good thing.
Brilliant, Paul. Great to get your insight. Great to talk to a reporter who's also a Spurs fan. Seems to be not too many. So it's great to get your insight. And hopefully we'll talk to you again during the season when things really are on the up.
Fingers crossed.
Cheers, Paul. Thank you.
Cheers, Paul. Brilliant insight from Paul. Gary, I've known you a long time. I've literally, what you said there about Conte, your mouth hit the floor. Your jaw hit the floor.
Look, people that have listened to this pod will know that I am not Conte's biggest fan. In fact, I'm not a fan at all. In fact, I pretty much put him as my most hated Tottenham manager of all time. Yeah. And that says something. I mean, I've seen George Graham and I can't stand the bloke. What Paul said there, I think is disgraceful about the training. Nobody would wish to live under those sort of circumstances. Nobody would wish to have their life not mapped out, completely unmapped out in that way. It has to create instability. It has to create resentment. And then couple that with what Paul said about every time he went to a press conference, you know, Conte sucked the air out of the room. I felt that just watching press conferences with the guy. So I think Paul's 100% right. Postecoglou's only got to walk in with a smile on his face for the whole place to feel brighter and merrier, right?
Yeah.
And it can't have been nice to play under. I was gobsmacked.
Jack, you've been around, you've worked for clubs, and you've seen, or at clubs, and you've seen press conferences and heard press conferences. How important are they? A lot of the time, press conferences, they're just paying lip service and a little bit of team news, but actually, how much can you get a sense of what's really going on when you sit in front of that manager and you hear what they say?
Well, I think one of the biggest things from press conferences, they go a long way for, you know, deciding whether a fan likes you or not.
Yeah.
So, you know, as you say, Postecoglou coming in, big smile on his face, you know, he's really going to be thinking carefully over the next few weeks, whenever it is, you know, probably in Australia for that pre-season game, how he's going to address, and he's going to know that the fans are going to be all waiting for this. But, yeah, I think it says a lot. You know, I've been around, you can tell, I mean, I'm not saying what's going on at home, but you can tell in a tone of voice that how a club's doing and how a manager's feeling and whether they're really feeling the pressure. And obviously, you know, Conte was a little bit extreme, but even I feel like even when we were doing well, it was a little bit negative. Never really sort of, you know, it was very samey and very, you know, I'm doing you a favour kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I know we've been through all that previously, but it never really, even when we got in the top 4, it was never really, you know, it was always sort of a bit negative.
And that feeds the doubters of what's going on at the club. They can pick up on what Conte's saying. Well, look, he's not happy. He's an elite manager, which I don't agree with. How can you serve this man wrong? Whereas Postecoglou, as Paul said, he's in a very easy position in a way. He comes in, he smiles.
I think it's very important for the way the manager deals with the media. I think that's a real, big thing. And from what I've seen at Postecoglou, I've watched a lot of Celtic, and he's a big character, but he looks like he's tough enough to deal with the media.
But they're gonna go straight on at him, I think, with the welcome to the Premier League, mate. This is the Premier League. You've done all right at Scotland, and how he deals with that is very important.
Yeah, definitely, and he's going to have whether that's the second or third question, he's going to have Kane straight away. Which is hard enough. We saw Nuno didn't really deal with that great. I know it was a bit difficult. We had the whole Kane not training stuff, but it's difficult enough when you've got people questioning about where you're from and whether you're good enough for the Premier League, let alone the biggest superstar in the league, whether he's going or staying.
So this is your debut. We've talked about Kane. Where are you on Kane? Should he stay? Should he go? I know you don't know, but where do you think? What do you think
should
will
he
happen?
or do I think?
Okay, both. Question one: should he stay?
Well, he's not going to sign a contract. We've all accepted that as fans.
I don't know.
You don't think ever?
No chance. He's not going to sign a contract.
Okay.
You don't think if we have a really positive season next season?
You know that if he doesn't sign a contract, Gary owes me lunch.
As soon as the 2021 summer transfer window closed, I said to myself, he'll leave on a free.
Imagine,
and I stick by that. I don't see.
But let me put this to you. Imagine United sign a big money striker this season. Imagine Mbappe goes to Real Madrid. City have got Haaland. Liverpool have got Nuno. Is that his name? Nuno? Not Nuno. Why have I got Nuno?
Darwin Núñez.
Darwin Núñez. Thank you. Where's he going to go?
I understand. That's always the point. Kane's going to leave. Kane's going to leave. Let's discuss where he's going to leave. Where he's going to go. So, oh wait, maybe not. But I feel like United are going to go out and not sign a 100 million striker and then come for him strong next year when he's on a free. But I agree. There's no guarantees.
But then suppose that we do better than United this season. Suppose that it all blows up there and it goes wrong under Ten Hag.
There's a 5% chance he signs a new contract.
It's gone up. It's gone up. We've got him.
But I want that lunch.
5%.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
I mean, look, this season, this summer, it looks like Real Madrid or nothing.
Yeah.
Whether Kane completely, drops everything and changes his mind up, if Real Madrid come calling, not many people to turn him down, but I'd be very surprised if he, with 4 young kids, suddenly goes,
Well, that's what I've
I'm
said.
going to go to Real
That's
Madrid
what I've
now.
said. And people go, oh, but you can get international schools and all this, that and the other. I believe, only from what I feel, I don't know anything about it, that he's a big family. They've got a big family bond there, and she seems a bit of a home girl, and I don't see him up sticks, taking everybody to Madrid with him. He might go for 2 years on his own, but I don't see it happen.
And also, I feel like Kane is not desperate to win Spanish trophies. I'm sure he'd love to win the Champions League. He wants to win the FA Cup. He wants to win the Premier League.
With Tottenham as well, by the way.
But yeah, that's what I mean. But say Kane went there, won 2-3 La Ligas. Would that excite him that much?
Right. So the answer to the question is like all of us is no one really knows. I mean,
I'd say the likeliest outcome right now is he stays this summer and leaves on a free.
Yeah, but like Gary said, where does he go on a free next summer? It's a conundrum.
Maybe he'll be thinking he scores 48 goals this season. Breaks the record this season.
And we'd still finish 7th.
And he can leave next season and go anywhere.
And on that, look, we've just finished 8th. Just to finish off the pod this week, West Ham are going to win a trophy. Nobody wanted that to happen, not in this room. Do I feel a little bit jealous? Not really, because I think the Conference League is, for me, if we won it, I'd be like, hey, we've won a trophy, and then that'd be it. I don't think I'd go to the parade. I don't know. I just feel it's not for Tottenham, and I feel that's because that sounds a bit arrogant, but I feel where we've come from the top 4 from a Champions League final a few years ago, to go win the Conference League whilst it's a trophy, people would laugh at us for winning it anyway. I don't feel it's a trophy we have to win. But for West Ham, it's great. Don't get me wrong. That is a brilliant achievement for West Ham. We're not here to wax lyrical about West Ham. It's a great achievement. But where are we on Spurs? Should we have taken it more seriously a few years ago? If we were to have been in it this year, should we have taken it seriously?
How would we have celebrated winning the Conference
But that's what
League?
I'm saying.
How would we have celebrated that? Full-time whistle goes, we've won the Conference League. If you were there in the ground, how would you have celebrated?
That's what I'm saying. I've thought
we scored a last-minute winner in the final.
I've thought about it. My first thought would be, they're going to laugh at us for winning this. Oh, look, you're over celebrating. The celebration police would have been out and gone,
it would
Spurs
almost
winning that.
be fitting for Spurs to end their trophy drought with a tournament that wasn't around 2 years ago. It would be very fitting. But I'm never one to turn down the trophy. But I'm glad we didn't take it overly, and I'm glad we didn't get in it this year as well.
I think there's some really interesting points made there. If Spurs had won the Conference League, we all know the piss-taking that would have happened. It doesn't count, it's meaningless, it's worthless. The narrative around West Ham winning it is, oh, it's wonderful, it's wonderful. And that should be the way that it is, because our expectations are higher. And, you know, the difficulty that the Conference League is going to throw up for Tottenham is that a club like West Ham or Aston Villa, who are in it next season, will be looking at the league saying, can we get above 7th, or is 7th where we are? If 7th is where we are, then actually we should take this quite seriously, because it's a trophy, we can win it. I'd argue that it's more valuable than the FA Cup. It carries more coefficient points in Europe. You get more prize money. You get greater coverage and glory around Europe. The FA, and it's the same prize. It qualifies you for the Europa League. So what really would be the difference between the Europa Conference League and the FA Cup? Except that the FA Cup is infinitely harder to win. So as a club like Villa or West Ham, why would you not go all out to win the Europa Conference League? And more English clubs will win it.
I think,
and it will create, rather than if Spurs won it, it was rubbish. You know, more English clubs will win it, and then it becomes Spurs still haven't won a trophy. So this competition is going to fuck us in a big way. But if we were in it, I think it's a competition. I don't think we should take any competition lightly. But at the end of the day, if we were in it, it's because we've had a poor season, and our aspirations should be higher, and we should be confident of finishing 5th or 6th as a minimum to qualify for the Europa League anyway, and pushing for a top 4 place to finish for Champions League. I would take it as a trophy, of course. Would I consider that ends our trophy doubt? Yes, on paper, of course it does. Would it end our trophy doubt with one of the trophies that we would want? Well, you know what, the League Cup, like, it goes back to this whole thing of what actually means something. And Pochettino had this big dilemma, and it is a conundrum. Yeah, I'd take the trophy. Of course, I would.
Take the trophy.
The thing that I was just thinking is, as much as we, snub it and act snobby about it,
it's not snobbish.
No, just generally, like, and I'm the same. But we saw how Mourinho celebrated it last year.
With Roma,
and it was more for Roma than him. You know, he's won multiple, Champions League.
Oh, come on, nothing's for anyone else but him.
Mourinho celebrated finishing 6th with a dance on the jig on the touchline, didn't he? And that was all about him and the achievement for him.
But yeah, I'm glad we didn't.
It's a
Would you rather win the League Cup or the Conference League?
Do you know what? I was thinking about this actually. I was trying to list the silverware that I would want to win in order. And I have top Champions League over Premier League. I have second the Premier League. Third, I have the Europa League over any of the domestic trophies.
It gets you into the Champions League. So
I think Europa League is... I'd much rather win the Europa League than the FA Cup or the League Cup. And then in fourth, I have tied, actually, the Europa Conference League and the FA Cup. I think I'd rather win the FA Cup because we're so synonymous with it and historically. But actually, I think the Europa Conference League, as I said earlier, is worth more in terms of money, in terms of prestige, in terms of brand, in terms of coefficient points, and it gets you the same prize.
I just want to fucking...
And it's easier to win. It's actually easier to win. And then last, the League Cup. That's my order. What's yours?
Premier League.
Over Champions League?
Champions League.
Yeah. I think if we won Champions League,
I'd go Premier League over Champions League, FA Cup over Europa League.
Because
over Europa League?
I just think...
even because of the prize in the Europa League is getting into the Champions League if you don't get there through the league.
What, and then get knocked out without having a shot over 2
hang on a minute. Hang on. But you say that, but we got further in the Champions League than we've got in the Europa League.
We've never reached an FA Cup final in my lifetime. I was born in 92, and I've been growing up desperate to see Spurs. What is it, 8 semi-final defeats?
Yeah.
I'm quite lucky.
I just think, imagine a day at Wembley winning the FA Cup would top any Europa League win anywhere.
Oh, I don't know.
40,000 Spurs fans over probably 8,000.
I think the other thing about that is you've beaten other English clubs. You've beaten probably a big English club in a final. I think and the history. I kind of agree. Forget the prize of the Europa League.
I just feel like winning a trophy feels right at Wembley.
I'd like to ask somebody
not in the middle of Budapest.
I mean, I've been to two FA Cup finals. I've been to Coventry in '87. I was a young lad, and my dad carried me out crying.
Same, yeah. Well, your dad didn't carry me out. My dad carried me out.
and '91 against Forest, which was sort of divine retribution, particularly with Mabbott being behind Des Walker and all of that. So I've been there, and I'm fortunate in that way. Of course, I'd love to see us win an FA Cup, but that question for me can only really be answered by somebody that was there in '84, who saw us lift the UEFA Cup as it was at that time. Ask them today, what would you rather, the Europa League, formerly UEFA Cup, or the FA Cup? I
feel like the UEFA Cup years back was bigger than the Europa League is now. But you obviously got the Champions League. A lot, teams use that just to get in the Champions League. When United won it under Mourinho, they'd finished outside the top four, and it was more, we're back in the Champions League rather than winning the Europa League.
Yeah. But I think United would have looked at the Europa League in the same way as we're now looking at the Europa Conference League, because they're the levels. Do you know what I mean? But
it feels like clubs are using that just to get back in. Yeah. Whereas if we won the Europa League, it would not even cross my mind that we're back in the Champions League. I would have no interest until months later. I'd be too excited.
I just, the idea of Tottenham winning a major European trophy, all in white.
Well, we can't this year. We might be able to win a domestic trophy all in white.
Cheers for the reminder.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. Jake,
thanks for having me.
Great debut. Enjoy yourself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good fun.
Yeah, good. Just a quick one on the Ashes. Now we've got an Australian manager. How are you feeling? Doesn't matter who wins it. That starts this week. I was just thinking, what am I going to do this week?
They're going to ask him about that in his first press conference.
Yeah, they are.
It's going to be right in the middle of the series.
But now we can just claim win-win regardless.
I'm really looking forward to the Ashes. I think it's going to be a huge series. I actually thought, when you said just a quick one, I really thought you were going to mention, you sent me a picture of an ice cream Biscoff.
Oh, God, yeah.
I really thought it was going to be that.
We didn't talk about that in club news. McDonald's doing an ice cream Biscoff.
McFlurry.
Okay, Jake knows.
So
with no, I can't go to the stadium between now and August, so maybe that just has to be the substitute.
By the way, just going back to the Ashes, sorry for that, but going back to the Ashes, Ben Stokes has claimed Tottenham as his club.
Right, so we're fucked.
What are you talking about? It's brilliant. It's fantastic.
Oh, brilliant. But,
Do you think the Ashes could provide a bit of a dampener?
It's a very small trophy, but we'll take it.
I love the Ashes. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, it's win-win because we've got an Australian manager. Anyway, gents, thank you so much. As I said at the start, we're here throughout the summer, and we will be back next week. And up the Spurs.